First step, selection of site. Worms are livestock and should be cared for in order that they may be put to best use. As such, select a site that would be well above the flood level, shaded, airy, and where water and raw materials are easily available. The temperature should be about 26 degrees Celsius. Vermi composting is best done in places where waste materials and water are available or readily accessed. It can be done inside a house or in the yard and open field. The earthworm used in vermi composting is not harmful to man and domestic animals. Second step, selection of housing type. Worm beds may be made of any available materials. Plastic container or old plastic basins will do. Third step, preparation of raw materials. Organic waste from the farm, yard, and household can be utilized for vermicomposting. The materials are first procured and processed before stocking the earthworms. The worms eat all organic waste or kitchen scraps. Peels of fruits, vegetable trimmings, kitchen leftovers, sawdust, rice straw, leaves, wood, paper, all animal manures except dog, cat, and human, and other organic waste. Fourth step, decomposition process. It will undergo the two following stages. Stage 1, anaerobic decomposition. Place the substrate in containers as airtight as possible. This is the anaerobic process, or composting without air, which is done to hasten the decomposition. This stage may last 1 week to 1 month, depending upon the quantity being processed and the size of the particle. The substrate is ready for use when the temperature had dropped to ambient levels and you can see the appearance of white mushrooms. Stage 2, aerobic decomposition. When the substrate has cooled down, place the substrate in an appropriate containers. This next phase is called the aerobic stage or composting with air. Stock with earthworms. The rate of producing vermicast is depending on the stocking density vis-a-vis the amount of substrate. It's been observed that the worms can eat faster if the substrate at this stage appears to be ideal. It has been observed that 100 kilos of substrate can be consumed within 30 days by 1 kilo of worms. Fifth step, maintenance of the worm beds. Test by squeezing a fistful of substrate. 5 to 7 drops of water indicate about 80% humidity. Care should be taken that the substrate is taken from the lower portion of the bed because the upper portion might already be dry but the lower portion is still wet. Protect the worms from natural predators. Birds, chickens, frogs, mice, snakes, and even pigs love to eat worms. While ants do not eat worms, they can kill your population if left unattended. Shade the worms from direct sunlight. Worms have no skin and cannot withstand direct sunlight. Loosen the substrate gently and do not allow it to get compacted. The constant watering of the beds will compact the substrate. Loosen the beds very gently when needed, taking care not to disturb the worms too much. Sixth step, harvesting. The earthworms are well-mannered and polite. They do not like to live with their poo. They eat at the substrate and deposit their casting on the top. In about 6 to 8 weeks, the substrate that was formerly identifiable as grass and leaves becomes transformed into granular earthy material. The decision to harvest depends on one's needs. When ready to harvest, pick the worms by hand and transfer them to a new worm bed. The vermicompost may be allowed to dry in the shade for a few days and then sifted if a finer compost is desired. Practical tip. Compost is ready to use when it is dark brown, crumbly and has an earthy smell. Lastly, the seventh step, drying and storage. Dry your vermicompost in the shade only. Exposing organic fertilizer to the sun will cause it to lose its nitrogen content. Vermicompost can be stored at 30% humidity in plastic bags. Store in a cool place away from direct sunlight. The main product derived from vermicomposting is vermicompost or earthworm castings. Worm biomass is a byproduct of the process. For vermicompost, it is used just like any organic fertilizer for ornamental plants and field crops. The amount of vermicompost applied depends on the plant to be fertilized and soil conditions. Plants grown for their leaves respond very well to high levels of vermicompost, while fruit crops require less. Vermicompost is an excellent source of organic matter for potting mixes and nursery plants. For the earthworm biomass, it can be used for another cycle of vermicomposting and for vermimeal production. Brgy Luz sell their vermicompost for 10 pesos per kilo and their earthworm biomass for 500 pesos per kilo. Some facts about the earthworm. Aristotle called the earthworms as the intestines of the earth. There are about 3,000 kinds of earthworms with a great variety and color, but only 6 are of commercial use. Tiger worm, Eisenia partida, African nightcrawler, Euchrylus eugenae, Asiatic worm, Ferritima postoma. The African nightcrawler has acclimatized well in the Philippines and are more commonly used species. Advantages of vermicompost. Availability of raw materials, environment friendly, no imported inputs required, labor intensive, and highly profitable. As for Brgy Luz, they're not only helping the environment by reducing their waste, but they're also finding an alternative way of generating income by practicing vermicomposting. True indeed, there is money in garbage.